Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into the latest in web development, specifically Rails 8.
Yeah, we've got this really insightful blog post, My Rails 8 Opinion, from a developer at Also Help.
And this isn't just a quick look, right? This person has, what, 10 years with Rails?
A decade, yeah.
Yeah,
And critically, they've actually been using Rails 8 in production for about 6 months. So it's real-world experience we're talking about.
exactly. That's what makes it so useful for you listening. You get the ground truth.
hmm
So our mission really is to pull out the big shifts, the philosophy behind Rails 8, and, what it all means for actually getting stuff done as a developer.
Okay.
All right, so first up, the author hits on something a bit surprising. The focus isn't on adding tons of new things, but on removing them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, isn't it? A new version bragging about taking things out.
Right.
Usually it's all about the shiny new features. But here, they're highlighting subtractions. The author even jokes about these implied subtitles like no pass required, no React required, maybe even no Redis required.
It's definitely a statement. What do you think is driving that? Is it just cleanup?
Well, I think it signals maturity.
Hmm.
The framework isn't scrambling to add everything anymore.
Okay.
It seems more about refining the core, making the developer workflow simpler, maybe, letting developers choose their preferred tools rather than forcing defaults.
That makes sense. And speaking of the core, there's some reassuring news too, right, for people already using Rails.
Oh, absolutely. The author stresses that the fundamental parts, the stuff that makes Rails,
Yeah,
well, Rails,
yeah.
that's still solid.
So things like the domain-centric approach, controllers.
Exactly. Still there, still effective. He calls controllers boring, which, in software development, boring is often good. It means reliable,
Huh, yeah, true.
predictable.
And that familiarity is huge. Less of a steep learning curve if you're upgrading or already know Rails.
Okay, so stable core, but also this idea of
Yeah.
omakases with choices. Now, omakases in Rails usually means you get the chef's selection of tools, right? The defaults are chosen for you. Right, the opinionated default stack.
Yeah.
But it sounds like Rails 8 is tweaking that. The author mentions a Reddit thread about unpopular Rails opinions,
Ah, yeah.
suggesting maybe that default stack isn't the perfect fit for everyone anymore. Needs change, preferences change.
So Rails 8 isn't ditching the opinions entirely, but it's making it easier to say, no thanks, I'll have something else.
Pretty much, you get the recommended path, but opting out is cleaner, more supported, like a menu with clear alternatives alongside the set meal.
And the author gives actual examples of where they opted out.
Yep, several. They stuck with PostgreSQL for the database, didn't use the default asset management, went with Vite instead.
Vite. Okay. Popular choice.
Yeah, and unpoly instead of Hotwire. For authentication, they use something called Authentication 0, not the built-in generator.
Interesting.
Why that one? Seems like they found it more minimal, maybe more customizable. They said it was significantly ahead for their needs. And TUI editor instead of tricks for rich text.
Wow, okay, so quite a few swaps.
And it wasn't random. They felt these specific tools, like Unpoly and TUI editor, were just far better for what they were building.
Right. It wasn't just difference for difference's sake.
Exactly. It highlights that flexibility. Developers can tailor the stack much more now.
And the result for them was better productivity.
That's what they report, yeah. Feeling more efficient because the tools were a better fit.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder, are frameworks moving towards being solid foundations you build on with your own choices?
A more modular approach, maybe?
Could be. And related to that, the database part is interesting. PostgreSQL taking on more roles.
Yeah, tell me about that. More than just storing data.
Right. The idea is using Postgres for systemic features, things you might normally use separate services for.
Like what?
Well, the author's local setup is a good example. They have separate Postgres databases, not just for the main app and tests, but also for cable, WebSockets,
Okay.
for caching, error tracking, even the background job queue.
Whoa. So instead of Redis for caching queues, they're using Postgres.
Seems like it, at least locally. It consolidates things. Fewer moving parts, potentially.
That definitely ties back to that no Redis required idea.
Exactly. And maybe the no pans required too. If your database can handle more, you might need fewer external services, simplifying deployment.
Makes sense. Less infrastructure complexity. The author did mention not having a separate analytics database locally, but that seems more project-specific.
Yeah, that's a preference.
Uh-huh.
But the overall trend seems to be leveraging Postgres more heavily.
Okay, so simplification, flexibility, a stable core. It all seems to build towards this idea the author mentions. Rails 8 as the one-person framework.
Yeah, what did that mean exactly?
I think it's about boosting individual productivity, letting one developer do more, faster, and manage the whole thing effectively.
Right. Control and efficiency for a single dev or a very small team.
The author kind of contrasts this with, say, some complex React setups, especially mentioning AI-generated code.
Ah, yeah. Which can sometimes add layers of abstraction that are hard to debug or manage alone.
Exactly. So the argument is Rails 8 keeps things manageable. It shortens that path from an idea popping into your head to getting it live in production.
While keeping the long-term maintenance feasible. Less accidental complexity.
Precisely. It's about speed and sustainability.
Okay, makes a lot of sense.
All right, so let's try and wrap this up. Key takeaways from this deep dive into one dev's Rails 8 experience.
Well, first, that surprising focus on simplification through removal. Less is more, perhaps.
Then the stability. The core Rails concepts are still there, which is good news for existing developers. Familiarity counts.
Definitely. And then the evolution of Omakase. Still opinionated, but much more flexible. You can swap out defaults more easily.
Like using Vite or unpoly or different auth.
Right. And Postgres will potentially playing a bigger role, handling things beyond just data storage, simplifying the overall stack.
And all this seems to point towards Rails 8 really empowering that solo developer, making it a strong one-person framework.
Yeah, faster development, manageable complexity.
So for you listening, hopefully this gives you a clearer picture of where Rails is going. It might affect how you approach your next project or just how you think about modern web frameworks in general.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought to chew on.
Go on.
If frameworks are becoming more modular, more like a foundation with optional components, what does that mean for the future? How will developers learn? Will we see more people assembling their own perfect stack from different parts rather than picking one big framework?
Less about choosing the framework, more about curating your framework. Interesting thought.